HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Today's program was brought to you by craftbeer.com, dedicated to small and independent U.S. craft brewers. For more information, visit craftbeer.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. We're a member-supported food radio network broadcasting over 35 weekly shows live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. Join our hosts as they lead you through the world of craft brewing, behind the scenes of the restaurant industry, inside the battle over school food, and beyond. Find us at heritageradionetwork.org.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Adam Sachs, editor-in-chief of Saveur Magazine. We'll talk to Adam about what else, all things wine and food. We'll also taste the Saveur Selects Petite Syrah for our weekly wine sip. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Adam Sachs is editor-in-chief of Saveur Magazine, a magazine dedicated to food, drink, travel, style, and home. He joined Saveur in 2014 and has steered the magazine towards telling deep, elegantly written stories about what makes food so meaningful to people all over the world. Adam also has received 3 James Beard Awards for his writing, which ain't too shabby. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Adam.
Thanks, Sam. Happy to be here.
Before I get into your background, I want to start because you have an interesting background. You have a test kitchen at the office. You go to a lot of chef dinners. You attend festivals. I just saw you down at the Charleston Wine and Food Festival.
Right.
So my question is, why are you not a fat schlub? Because you're not.
This is radio, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm could clock in at even 99 pounds, and
looking strong.
I don't fat. Let's just find fat.
But
I'm sucking in my gut. We're sitting
but
here.
But you are around so much food. You have to be somewhat disciplined.
I'm not at all. I've been writing about food for a fair number of years now, and I've never been one of those people at a tasting or a review, when I used to do that, who could just have one bite and kind of think about it and process it and file it away. I finish things. If I like it, I finish things.
Good for you. You have a good metabolism.
Yeah. Thanks.
So that's a good segue. So I want to. You have an extensive background in traditional and digital publishing, certainly with a slant towards food. What I want you to do is talk a little about your background to the point, where you're at Saveur right now. because you've been at some interesting places. So just give our audience a little quick background. On
I'll skip birth and grammar school and all that, bar mitzvah. And,
Kentucky.
Kentucky.
They have bar mitzvahs in Kentucky?
They do. They don't make a lot of great wine. They make a lot of good corn whiskey down there.
There you go.
They do have bar mitzvahs in Kentucky.
They do?
Yeah, a few, now and again. So I moved to New York about a year after I graduated from college, and I had a somewhat vague idea that I wanted to work in journalism and some sort of writing. And I ended up working at a magazine that folded, and was a fact checker at Condé Nast Traveler for a little while. And when Time Out launched in '95, I wrote them a letter. I'd gone to school in London for a little while, so I was probably one of the not huge group of people who recognized that brand from London.
For sure.
And I luckily this is pre-email, I guess, so I sent them a physical letter, and I begged them for a job, and they didn't have anyone else, so they gave me a job, and I ended up editing the restaurant section there. And I thought when I started that I was also helping edit a consumer section and writing for different sections and doing some newsy stuff, and I didn't know that food would be the beat that I really fell in love with. But it was a great restaurants were a great way to discover the city, to write about the fall in love with the city, to get to know the city, restaurants as sport, or the sociology of the restaurant scene here. And then I think, like a lot of people who write about food, I ended up feeling like I sort of fell more in love with food than restaurants. I still love to eat in restaurants, and I love the stories behind them, but I really wanted to find out where food came from, and I wanted to talk about the people who make it and the ingredients that make it come together. So I left Time Out. I was there for about 2.5 years, and it was a great introduction to New York and a great introduction to...
Were they were fledgling? They were building it up?
They were
new,
new,
were part
yeah.
of...
Yeah, I wrote for the first issue, and I came on staff for the second issue, and I was there for the 100th issue. I did I ate 100. No, I ranked the top 100 restaurant desserts in New York. So this is pre-blog.
You ate 100 different ones?
I ate 157 restaurant desserts. I was going through a breakup, so I think I was losing my mind a little bit, and I was...
It was your comfort.
I was finding comfort.
Yeah.
And not sanity, but finding comfort.
Do
and
you
distraction.
remember back what stood out? I mean, was it like the dessert at Le Cirque? Or?
There was. It's funny you say Le Cirque. I actually went with Pete Wells, who was writing for us at the time, and we had lunch.
Pete was at Time Out New York?
Well, he was a freelancer.
Yeah.
And he and I had lunch, a kind of lovely lunch at the Le Cirque in the old New York Palace, was it?
Yeah.
And at the end, I guess it was Jacques Torres at the time. It was the pastry chef there, and he sent out. So we were going places and having every dessert on the menu.
But the menu at Le Cirque is the size of the food menu.
Exactly. So we ate all of those.
Jesus.
And I remember one of the ones that I loved and put on. I think I ended up putting on the top 100, which is a lot. Was this a banana tart? And I loathe bananas. I hate bananas. And I was it impressed me that someone could make something made out of something I hate taste pretty good.
And you were able to eat it.
I'm not allergic. I just
do you ever go fishing or fish?
For bananas? No. Do I fish?
Yeah.
I'm not a fisher
because
person.
your bananas on a boat are bad luck.
Oh,
that's
okay.
a whole separate story.
Well,
all right.
then if I know where to go. Then I want to make sure I don't find any bananas.
All right, so you leave Time Out New York.
I got a job. I started writing for GQ magazine, an opening came up there, and I got a job as a staff writer there, and I wrote about everything from pants to murder to do book reviews to. And I would every story I would try to get them to send me somewhere where I could eat. And so even if the story wasn't about eating, I would try to get them to send me somewhere where there were good restaurants and where I could eat. And then I was there for 5 years and did some food writing, not a lot. Alan Richmond was the
very well established
the alpha food writer at the time there.
Right.
My first day, he introduced me to everyone as the backstabber. He had claimed I'd come to take his job, but that never happened.
First day on the work, you made the guy paranoid. That's good.
Yeah, I think he's still writing for the magazine. He's 170 years old now. And he's a real.
I still see some pieces. By
Yeah,
him
no,
around.
he's still plugging away. He's great. And so I was there for 5 years, and I left to go freelance, and I accidentally stayed a freelance travel and food writer for 11 years,
Wow.
which is way too long to do something like that. But I spent most of that time. I wrote about different things. I would still do some celebrity stuff or style stuff or sort of general.
You wrote about some pretty high-profile celebrities.
I did. Well,
McConaughey.
I used to do
Farrell.
some details, which is now sadly shed. I did some of their sort of.
Can I just
covers.
tell you one thing? I
Yeah.
worked at the Soho Weekly News.
Okay.
In the late 70s, and a lot of the people from Soho left and started details. Annie
That's
and
right.
David and all those
It was
guys.
It was on Broadway, right?
But
it was.
it morphed into a more commercial magazine.
Yeah, when Condé Nast bought
when
it.
they bought it.
Yeah, moved it to Midtown. But for most of those 11 years, I was writing food stories that were travel stories or travel stories that were food stories, but generally trying to keep it in the, going places and eating good stuff.
Were any of the James Beard Awards in that period?
Yeah, all of them were.
They all were.
Yeah.
In technically your freelance period.
Yeah. I was nominated once when I was at GQ for actually it was a 3-part story. I wrote part of it. Alan Rich wrote part of it, and Adam Rappaport, who's at Bon Appetit now, wrote the other part. And we were nominated and we lost, and it was rough, but we survived.
So you won in 2013 and in 2014, right?
I know I won in 2013 because yes, right, because my daughter was born the next day.
Right.
So
I have in my notes.
Hard to forget that particular weekend.
You did a story on ramen, in search of ramen, and a rosé trip to Bandol. Do you remember those?
Yeah, this is why they give you a medal for this sort of hard hitting
A rosé
hard
trip to
report.
Bandol. Well, obviously you said something right.
Yeah, I did, the ramen story was in Fukuoka in the south of Japan, and that's a story where I was thinking, instead of having these long multi-course meals, it's just a bowl of soup, so I could hit 3-4 restaurants a night, and then you land in the second one, you're sweating profusely and you're dizzy, and your body starts. By day 2, your body starts to revolt, and there was a lot of ramen for that one. The other one was I don't think I won for the rosé one though.
No.
I always. But thank you for bringing it up because I always thought I should.
Yeah, there you go. So 11 years, couple of James Beards in there. Then what happens?
Then, the daughter who was born the day after winning a couple of them, it's not that I did it to exhaustion, but I did try to travel a lot, and I tried to sort of I would string together stories, and I would be away from home for a long time, and that was fine when I was single,
Right.
or
life
without
changes.
kids. Yeah, and I didn't want to be on a pretty beach somewhere FaceTiming my kids and trying to explain that I'm writing, again, hard-hitting journalism about how pretty this beach is or how good this sandwich is.
So it's time to get a real job.
So it's time to get a real job, and I managed to convince someone at Jeff Bartkovics, who started Tasting Table, hired me to be the editorial director of that, and that was a great gig because it was a mixture of stuff I knew about, which was how to tell stories and put together stories about food and food culture, and some stuff I didn't know about, which was managing people, which was digital side of things. And
that was your first step into real digital, right?
I mean, of course, any kind of writer now writes for. If you write for print, you also write for digital.
Right.
But
I
it was
wanna
the
talk
first
about
time.
that later.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first time I had thought about it from a editing standpoint or a business standpoint. And the other nice thing about Tasting Table was that we had a really lovely test kitchen, and it allowed me a chance to sort of bring people who I admired in. We did a book party for Rene Redzepi when his book came out.
From Noma.
Little known
Who
place.
just closed his restaurant down, right?
Well, they're
location.
Yeah, they're moving.
Right.
They're moving.
Right.
Yeah, a couple weekends ago.
So you're at Tasting Table for how long?
I was there for not quite 2 years.
2 years.
A little longer.
And you went on to...
Saveur. I hope
So
I pronounced
tasting-
that correctly.
I was going to ask you, is it Saveur? Let's go through the potential.
Oh no! Yeah,
Savor,
I get
Savor,
Saveur.
Savor.
I get Savior a lot. Which
Savior.
sounds, a little more. reverential than we need.
So that we continue the show on the right track, it's Saveur.
That's
Okay.
good. That's as good as I can do it.
Okay.
I'm from Kentucky, so
So you got to Saveur in late 2014. So
Very
you're-
end of 2014,
Yeah. So
yeah.
you're already into a couple of years and a few cycles and all of that. All right. So I want to talk to you about the magazine a little. You recently said in your editor's notes, you said with all the events happening in the past year, and I mean the election and the world and all of that, you said
I didn't mean that. I didn't mean.
Yes, you did.
You're reading between the lines.
No, I'm not. You said we read the news, we wonder at the state of things, and we seek comfort in familial nourishing rituals.
Yeah.
So my question is, and I think this is what you led into and what you're alluding to, why is food so important to people? I know it's a very general question,
Yeah.
but, you're a food magazine and there's a mission statement and a goal.
Right.
Why, tell me your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for me as a person and not necessarily on behalf of the brand, you could obviously just have food as fuel. You could just eat to stay
Sustenance
to stay alive, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if that's your how you.
But
you're
it's
born.
more interesting than that.
I just think it's the only thing that we sort of think of as part of culture that's that intimate, that you put it into your body, that if you're feeding someone, if you're making food for someone, you're giving something that they ingest, and it affects how they feel at that moment, it affects how they feel later, it affects their health. There's also the social side of it, that when you sit down to eat with people, it's an intimate setting. It's a way to sort of be with people in a way that's different than just sitting around a table and not having any food or drink between you. And I think if you like to think about food and where it comes from, and you happen to like to cook, then it's a whole other dimension where you want to spend time with the people who make it. You want to think about where it comes from. I get a lot of pleasure just from being in the kitchen. In that editor's letter that you referred to, quoted from, I was talking about making stock.
You're stock obsessive of the moment.
I live in Brooklyn, so I need a bigger freezer. I need to get a chest freezer for the basement, but that there's something.
So every bone you have and carcass, you're saving it and you're making stock.
I wait till the guests leave and I pick all the chicken bones off their.
So you make stock with used bones?
Yeah, I don't know if that's not Saveur. That's not an official test kitchen approved technique.
I'm not trying to get you fired.
No, I mean, but there's something about, even if you're not. I like to throw a dinner party. I like to cook for friends. I like to cook for my family. But I also just like, if once the kids go to bed, to have some little project that I can kind of do from muscle memory, not really think about it, lose myself in the activity of it a little bit, and then you get something that is going to be delicious, hopefully later,
right?
And it pays dividends down the road.
I've followed you on Instagram, and I would say you're a fairly experimental eater. You would eat the organs of a lot of animals.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're not walking around still, but yeah, and they anything but a banana. Anything but a banana.
Right.
This is why I'm going to be on a boat soon.
Like a skewer of yakitori chicken hearts is fine versus a banana.
Yes, I like any day.
Now, also, you built in your house in Brooklyn, you built a wood-burning fire grill, which is not typical.
Right. For those of you listening outside the Brooklyn,
do not try this at home
area. That's not, most apartments are not outfitted with wood burning.
What compelled you to do that?
So we were renovating a place. We got very lucky and found a house that we could, a wreck of a house that we could afford to spend way too long and too much money renovating. It in the kitchen where we put the kitchen, there was a wall that had a hole behind the wall, so there had been a fireplace, we knew, and I was thinking, all right, let's open this up. We could only afford to open up one of the there was another one in the living room, so if we're going to open one, let's do it in the kitchen, because there's something so nice about a hearth, about fire in the kitchen. And incredible. Even before I thought about cooking, and then I thought, all right, let's bring it up to sort of waist level so we could cook on it. And then it was right about the time that Ben from Grillworks was starting to make some get some notice in restaurants and start to put his grills, which are the ones, these cranks that go up and down,
Right.
sort of a South American style.
Like parillas.
Yeah,
Parrillas,
exactly. Yeah,
or
I was
how
trying
they
not to say that because I don't know how to
Right.
pronounce it. And I called him up and I said, can you do this in a home? And he said, sure. And so after a lot of conversation back and forth between him and our contractor, who was kind of suspicious of the whole thing, and my girlfriend was very suspicious of the whole thing, we decided to put this in, and it's fantastic. It's essentially just a piece of metal that goes up and down in a fireplace, but
it's wood burning, right?
it's wood burning, wood or charcoal. We put a exhaust fan on the
Right.
chimney so that it would help with the draw, but it already has a pretty good draw.
So in the suburbs where I'm from, you barbecue year round because
Right.
a ribeye tastes better on a barbecue.
Absolutely.
Maybe in a cast iron skillet, but I'd rather. Do you forego the barbecue for that? Cause
that is my barbecue.
You don't
I mean,
have to barbecue in the
Yeah,
backyard.
that is my barbecue. I use it year round. I try to use it at least once a week. And it's once you. I mean, I'd been living in Manhattan for 20 years before I moved to Brooklyn.
Ain't no barbecue there.
I had a couple little, tiny terraces with tiny barbecues on them, but I didn't have a lot of grilling experience, so there was a real learning curve.
Have you come to the point where you're starting to perfect?
I mean, I'm not going to go up with against some Argentinian master or something.
Do you have a preference, let's say, to hickory wood versus
No,
cherry, or you're not there?
I think I'm pretty good at using touch and sense and smell and
Right.
sight to see if stuff is done, and I really get a kick out of trying to end up doing whole meals there. So I'll grill bread and put something grilled on that, and then do
great.
a big piece of protein, and then the vegetables, and then while we're eating dinner, put some fruit or something, and
Right.
let it get smoky. But I don't. I've tried different woods. I don't.
Doesn't
I don't
matter.
know. It does.
Yeah.
I mean, it does, but I
It
don't.
does,
I don't
but
have
yeah.
a strong preference.
Right.
For it.
All right, let's talk about the magazine a little.
Sure.
So, Saveur is a food and lifestyle magazine. I said earlier it's travel, home, beverage, and all of that. How does the magazine differentiate itself from other food magazines? Because there's some well-known people in the space, so you
Sure.
want to
Yeah, and I
get your imprint
and
out there.
and I like all our competitors
Right.
and friends, both the people who run them and the products
Good people,
themselves.
yeah.
I think Saveur, our place in the food media landscape, and it's changed a lot since the magazine was founded in '94. I mean, you think about pre food blog, really before this explosion of interest in food and food media. I think now what we do really well is tell stories, and we give context, and we have stories with voice. And while we give recipes, I mean, it's a food magazine. It's not every issue is sort of full of something to make on a Wednesday evening when you've got 60
The
minutes.
recipes wrap around the stories.
I think
in
so,
a lot of
yeah.
ways, but the stories are very in depth.
Yeah, the line I always use is that we follow food to its source, and we want to know context. We want to know the personalities behind things. We want to just tell good stories, and so I think you could be a Saveur reader and read different food magazines or your pick of online food outlets. But what we try to do is really have real voice, real sense of place, beautiful photography, and give people some context for what they're eating.
I was reading the current issue on the plane coming back from the Charleston Wine and Food Festival, and I was reading the story on pu'er tea.
Pu'er tea, yeah.
I'm like, I got to get some of this,
Yeah.
but it seems like it's going to be very difficult.
It's expensive.
But it was about tea from China, very far away, obscure. I think that sort of tells the way the magazine is. It gets into a story that's exotic in that one, and in depth.
Right. And if you told me if you showed me a story that it was sort of a tasting notes on tea or a comparison of tea or the business or the just tea story, I'm not a big tea drinker, but when Max Falkowitz, who wrote it, started talking to me about the story, he's talking about this beautiful part of the world, this sort of swashbuckling subculture of people who are sort of secretive about where they source the tea, the way that the tea, this explosion of interest in this thousands of year old product has changed the economy there. They've gone from small hand-built homes to sort of McMansions in half a generation, and it's just this story that could run in the New Yorker or Harper's or The Economist, or it's a food story, but you don't have to go into it loving tea to be taken along for the ride, and it turned out to be a really cool story.
It was a cool story, and there was a little sidebar about teas. So
there was
you're
about
done
the
with
packaging,
it.
or
It's
about
like, what
how
is
it's
this?
made.
Where do I get it? Can I? And it
Right.
talks about that. So that sort of leads me to, how do you select stories? I mean, you have a big world, a lot of food.
Sure.
I mean, that's a pretty obscure. Tea's not an obscure topic, but that type of tea in Yunnan, China, or wherever it was.
Right, tea's huge, but half the population of the planet.
How do you select
lives on
stories? I mean, do you know what you're doing for your November issue? What
some stories?
How do you decide?
I think you try to do a mix of reaching out to writers you know and admire, see what they're interested in. I'm a recovering writer first before I'm an editor, so I trust writers. I want to trust writers. I want to know what they've seen. We get around, all of us on staff, but
they pitch you.
So you're listening, you're talking, you're soliciting pitches, and then you're also thinking, okay, what haven't we written about? What parts of the world haven't we visited in a while? And then, explicitly or not, I think you're sort of thinking about what's in the zeitgeist. What's if we've done Copenhagen, what's happening in Oslo, or if we've done tea, is there did Max the writer find some a food story along the way? And then it just becomes about figuring out the mix. You don't want to do too much of one type of food. You don't want to do too much of one region. You don't want to feel like you're doing something because it follows the trends, but you also don't want to do something that you feel is 5 years too late.
Do you feel it's not important for the magazine to follow trends? To some extent, it would be yes, but do you feel you kind of follow your own way?
I think you want to be timely, and you want to be on top of what, or a little ahead of what people are thinking about and talking about, but you don't want to be feel that you have to follow a trend, because then you're going to be behind it. And also the fact that it's trending in Bushwick or it's trending in Baltimore or wherever, it doesn't maybe lend itself to a great story. So I think story first. Our audience is obviously our reader. Can we inform and delight and get them to keep reading a story? But the trends, you want to know what's happening in the world, but you don't want to feel like you're just kind of hitting notes because you've seen them on menus across the country.
So answer two questions for me. The first one is, has anyone ever pitched you a story
on air?
Not on air. I'm not. Pitch, one of your writers pitched you a story that you were unsure of, but bought in.
But turned out
and it either blew up or good or bad, that you regret.
I'll leave the regrets to off-air comments, but you never know. I mean, I come at I'm a peculiar editor in that I spent most of my career as a writer. I trust that writers you trust and voices you like, that they're out there finding this stuff, and so you want to build in room. You want to leave room for kind of the joy of discovery in a story. You don't want to feel like you've edited it or you've assigned it to a point where there's nothing for them to find out.
Right.
On the other hand, travel's expensive. We pay our writers a fair rate, and so you want to make sure they come back with something. So certainly, tea's on my mind because you mentioned it. I was hoping tea would be an interesting story because it was a compelling pitch, but I was really glad that with how
it was
came
an interesting story,
and that's something where that's a part of the world I didn't know, and a subject I'm not inherently knowledgeable or interested in. So that was a happy surprise.
The second question was, did you do a story way ahead of a trend? Like the tea story, poor tea could be, is there an example you could cite where you were on something 10 months, a year before? And then
at Saveur or just as a writer?
At Saveur.
Yeah. I've only been there for a short time, so who knows if the trend is going to hit. I can't think of something where we were sort of, predicted it.
Right. coconut water or whatever.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we did a story a couple issues ago about the campaign to bring to cultivate breadfruit, as there's a breadfruit institute in Hawaii, and there's a push to sort of, it never went away, but to really bring it back into the mainstream of the diet there, both for health reasons and sustainability reasons. And that's one of those things that, we felt like it was a compelling story, and then we'll know, in a couple of years if they were successful with that.
Right. It'll take time. I want to talk to you about digital and mainstream media, because you're fairly well prepared to talk about it, because I think your tenure at Tasting Table and, all your other gigs that you mentioned. Is there a divide between digital and mainstream media? And
when you say mainstream, you mean like print
magazines? Yeah. And has digital changed publishing?
Oh yeah.
How has it affected Saveur, your experience specifically?
I think a broader issue is that when people talk about food writing or food media, we talk about it like it's this monolithic thing, but it's an umbrella that covers, restaurant criticism. It covers talking about sustainability, politics, recipes, restaurant cultures, celebrity chefs, the history of cuisines. So the nice thing about, the magic of the internet is that you can reach you can talk about all those things. And then if you're a Saveur reader who is interested in remodeling their kitchen, you can find something about style and design. If you don't care about that at all, you can skip that. Whereas in print, if we give real estate to something that is going to alienate a specific kind of reader, or we change up the character of the mix, and people see something they're not expecting, that can lead to some unhappy letter writers.
So it expands what you can cover in a different offering.
I think it just broadens what you can do. I mean, I think the challenge for any publication or any brand or any editor these days is to have what you do across platforms feel true to the brand, but also right for the platform. So who we are and the tone of voice and the every little granular thing isn't going to be the same in print or Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or Pinterest or web, but it should be coherent. It shouldn't be 6 or 7 different voices that don't seem to hang together at all.
I find that a lot of the food magazines online, for many years before I was reading Saveur and met you, sort of a database for recipes.
There's a lot of that, yeah.
And and it sounds like you're telling me and acting out, and I've seen it. You use the digital platform to expand the brand.
Absolutely, yeah. And digital will always be better at that. When Saveur launched 23 years ago, you got it in your physical mailbox. You couldn't be, if there was a story about Corsican cuisine or whatever it was, you read it and you'd either like the recipes or not, but you'd save the issue, hopefully.
Right.
And now if you're standing in line in the supermarket and you want to know about, Corsican cuisine, you look at your phone and there are 100,000 options.
It's crazy.
It's always going to be a better, format or medium for
it's
a library like that.
All right, so this is a wine show. We have to talk about wine a little.
A little, sure.
I don't have to come over there and put you in a headlock and make you talk about wine. So a little earlier, I asked you why food is so important, just as a category. Same question. Wine.
I mean,
I think there's similarities.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
tell me how you see it.
It's so hard to not hit every cliche that wine is culture, that wine is it's communal, it brings people together, it goes well with food. So if there's something that is a complement to food, it just makes eating better. But the other side of it makes you happy.
Right.
There was a period when I got into food and I thought, okay, I'm going to be into food, but I'm just going to steer clear of wine because it's this rabbit hole of specializing and detail, and I'm not good with numbers and math, and I'll never remember if it tastes like shoe leather or bootstrap or dried cherry or kumquats or whatever. Yeah. And then I've been very lucky to eat, been treated to a lot of meals or found myself at a lot of nice dinners and meals, and slowly you're introduced to all this wine.
Wine is a critical
you realize
part of that.
You love it, yeah, and you seek it out. I still definitely don't consider myself a wine expert, but
Do you know what you like?
yeah, I do.
All right,
know
we're going to
that.
get into that later. But wine is an agricultural product.
Right.
So when we talk about food, wine has similarities as far as sustainability, growing farmers, and all
Absolutely.
of that. And it's also a very social thing.
And it's got culture behind it. It's got story. I mean, that's
Some of it goes way back.
I can't. My eyes will glaze over if I read numbers. But if you tell me the story about the winemaker or the region and how it got that way, I love those kinds of stories.
So there are magazines called Food and Wine, other magazines that cover it. You cover wine to the extent that you want to. I mean, how do you determine your wine coverage?
I think it really comes down to, again, to stories. So I think one of the conversations that we have, and I don't know if it's something that you think about for the show, is that how do you gauge your readers or your audience's level of connoisseurship or lack thereof? Where are they in their wine knowledge or experience? And so how do you tell a story that doesn't go over their head but doesn't condescend to them or doesn't bore them or doesn't tell them a story that
how do you find that?
So
how do you define that fine line?
I think the cover and the defense mechanism is to default to, or to make sure that whether it's a wine that you're familiar with as a reader or it's new to you, if it's told with story, if there's narrative, if there's personalities, if there are scenes, if there's a sense of geography and place, and not just talking about soil structure and sugar, percentages. Then, if it's a well-told story, you can, I love when a magazine will, like the New Yorker, or when you're on a plane and you've read every story that you thought you were going to read, and you can't use your phone, so you read like the story about dance for me. Like I would never seek out a dance column, but a well-told dance column is a well-told story. So
a well-told story is a well-told story,
and not to compare dance to wine, but I think again, just to have great stories, and get at why this wine is important to the people who find it interesting and exciting.
So in our next segment, we do a thing called the Weekly Wine Sip. Saveur has a curated wine club called Saveur Selects. When we taste the wine, we'll talk a little about it. But before we move into our wine list, tell me a couple things. Tell me, and I don't know if this is a silly question, current trends in food and wine. I mean, what do you see out there? It sort of relates to how do you pick stories? I mean,
right.
What are you looking forward at?
I think I think from a editor's perspective, or from when we're trying to think of stories, it's definitely easier if you're telling me about a region that is getting some acclaim that hadn't gotten any interest before, or if it's up and coming region.
Good current example? Do you have one?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Past one? Is it like Corsica or Sicily or Georgia in Eastern Europe? Stuff like that, right?
Yeah, we had a story by a writer named Adam Golner a few months ago about Armenian wine. And Armenia is an interesting place because it's one of the
ancient
birthplaces of wine. There's a cave there that the writer visited that has not the first winery, but some relics of the earliest known relics of wine storage.
Right. I think it's clay.
Yeah, the
big clay urns and all that.
I can't pronounce. And it's
amphoras.
Amphoras. Yeah,
that's it.
And it's a cool story because now they're 6,000 years later or so, they're making wine there again, and the wine industry is sort of coming back. So there's a current event side of it. There's something you can go out and buy a bottle of it, or you will be able to buy the stuff soon. So I think that's a kind of perfect story because you've got history and culture and narrative. I disagree with some of my French fine dining friends. I really like biodynamic wines and funky wines, and if it's weird and got chunks in it, I'm pretty interested in it. I don't know if that means what that says about my taste. Or
since I've been doing this show, Brooklyn is a pretty big hub for organic biodynamic wines. The Four Horsemen, June, 10 Bells, Company in the City. I mean, these guys feature it. There's a bunch of stores and all of that.
Yeah, I'm headed to a wine dinner at Contra after this.
Right, which is
they were
down. Yeah, the Raw Wine Festival was in Brooklyn. So there are a lot of people who support it, and some people, who just shrug it off. But
I like that, and I would happily have that, and then have whatever gold standard of the greatest,
Cali
the French
Bordeaux,
expression
yeah.
or something. Yeah, I like both of them. I like those.
Have you done any stories on natural, organic, biodynamic wines that you could recall in the last couple of years?
So not as a trend. It's certainly there are winemakers who've come up in the stories,
Right.
but not as kind of as its own standalone story.
Do you feel it's a trend, or I think it's established already.
It's established, but I think it's like a lot of there are still magazines out there telling people it's okay to drink rosé. So what's established in some circles is still kind of news to others. No, I think it's something that maybe what's interesting about it is that it's getting a little more mature and that people are differentiating between the folks who can do really good and interesting things and the folks that some of it's just novelty and doesn't work.
There's a lot of cheerleaders, Pascaline, Le Pelletier, Caleb, Ganser. I mean, there are a bunch of people. Justin Cherno at Four Horsemen.
Right.
I mean, these guys are good spokespeople for that.
Absolutely.
Tell me a few, and then we're going to break for our wine list. Tell me a few food people that are doing it right.
People who are doing it right.
Is it chefs, or are there advocates?
So many.
I always see Jose Andres always doing charitable stuff. I mean, does anything hit your radar?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question because there are so many people out there doing good stuff. I'm trying to think of who's impressive out there. I mean, I just randomly, off the top of my head, there's a guy named Blaine Wetzel. I did a profile of last year, who I don't know if you asked if we did anything that was ahead of the curve. I don't know if this is ahead or not, but he has a restaurant called the Willows Inn on Lummi Island in the Pacific Northwest, and it's just one of the more beautiful meals I had all year for sure.
All local and
everything
sustainable.
From there. Yeah, but it's also I think what's happening in food that's exciting right now is that whether it's the South with what Sean Brock has done there, or what Rene and his team at Noma have done for getting attention for Nordic cuisine. There's now this next after that interesting generation where they're learning from all that, but they're able to do. They don't have to be purist about it, and they can do food that's very personal and curious.
Those are great examples. Nobody even talks about Ferry and Adria anymore. He's like an old fart or something.
Well, he's not an old fart, but they talk about it with reverence. With elderly clothes.
But he's less top of mind than he was.
Yeah,
he's still legendary.
Yeah, I think that someone like that had such a massive influence. There's bound to be people are looking for the people like me and people who get into traveling to eat or looking at rankings or like to think about what's happening, what's the zeitgeist. They're always looking for the next thing.
Right. All right. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking to Adam Sachs. Adam is the editor-in-chief of Saveur Magazine. When we come back, we're going to subject Adam to our wine list. And then we're going to taste the Saveur Selects Petite Syrah. So you're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network.
Do you love craft beer? The diversity of styles and flavors? The stories of small brewery businesses and the communities behind today's craft beer movement? If so, you'll love craftbeer.com, published by the Brewers Association. Whether you tasted your first craft beer 30 years ago or just caught the bug last week, craftbeer.com is the #1 destination for beer education, news, and recipes. Looking for a local brewery? Use the internet's most robust brewery finder to discover your new favorite place. Want to get geeky about your favorite beer style or find the perfect pairing for dinner? Craftbeer.com is the leading authority and can help. Celebrate the best of American beer. Visit craftbeer.com today.
All right, we're back. We're back with Adam Sachs. Adam is the editor-in-chief of Saveur Magazine, and we are now We've now handcuffed Adam to his chair, and we are going to subject him to our weekly wine list.
It's hard to drink in handcuffs, but I'm
Which is
going to figure it out.
This is a series of questions. Answer them quickly. Don't dwell on them, all right?
You see that when you ask me a direct question, I freeze up and I can't think
I
of
know.
it.
Jesus.
You asked me the names of my children. I couldn't even.
All right.
I could narrow it down.
I'm not going to ask you that. All right, so the first question is, what are you drinking now? Are you drinking any wine at the house? Is there anything you've sort of got? Is it rosé? I mean, are you drinking a lot of Bordeaux? Do you remember drinking something currently?
I drink a lot of Morgon. I drink a lot of light reds. I like something like a lot of people that we could put it in the fridge and get a little chill on it.
Cru Beaujolais, Gamay,
I like all that
Morgon.
stuff, yeah.
That's great stuff.
I like sparkling. I live in close to Thirst, not to put in a plug. They're just people I like. Thirst wine merchants, and tend to go in and see what they're
Let
interested
them
in.
pick for you.
Yeah.
All right, so we don't ask people this, but you're a food guy. What are you eating now? Is there something? And I think the answer is stock,
Just eating
right?
stock.
But I mean, you're making
Yeah.
stock. But is there something
Yeah.
you keep going back to that you've been eating a lot of in the last few months?
I see. I knew I would. I can't even remember what I had for lunch. I like again. I have this crazy grill in my house, so I like to make things on fire. So
Okay.
I do whole fish, or I do pork rack and let it cook for a few hours and keep it high up and let it get a lot of smoke.
So the answer is, good use of the grill, whatever makes sense on the grill.
I went hunting my first time. Well, it was shooting. I went shooting. I didn't hunt because we weren't really walking. But we shot pheasant, and so I made pheasant rillettes, and that's very satisfying.
On the wood grill?
No, just I grilled the pheasant. It's hard. There's not a lot of fat.
Yeah.
I just cooked it down in a mixture of olive oil and duck fat. I have a fridge full of duck confit right now. Okay. Oh, see, it takes me a little while, but then I remember.
It's coming back, right?
I did a dinner
I have
party.
8 pounds of duck confit
have a lot.
fat in my.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I had. We did a dinner party and with some friends recently, and I made everyone eat confit duck necks and goose necks. I realized I had about 10 duck and goose necks in my freezer.
There's this tender meat around the bone,
That's great.
right?
Yeah, but you have to pick them up, and it gets messy. It's like
and there's not a ton, but you bite
there's a
around
lot.
them.
Yeah, and then I made little puy lentils, those little French lentils with. I also confit the gizzards and cut them up. So there was and it just swimming in duck fat. So
All right, so think about that, and you may have answered this, but favorite wine and food pairing.
So are we allowed to swear on this show? Is this a family
You
show?
could say whatever you fucking want.
I know. Thank you. I know that this is sacrilegious, and I know that you get letters and they're going to pick at the show or pick at Saveur, but I think pairing is bullshit. I love to drink wine with food, but I don't like to think too much about the combination. Some work better than others, some don't. But every time someone stops and says, "Okay, do you get it? Are you feeling it? The magic, the electricity."
People are overthinking it.
I think they're overthinking it.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
There's obviously some that there's a harmony there, and sometimes you get fireworks. But a lot of times, I feel like I'd rather just eat and drink and have things that generally go nicely together.
You're not overthinking it. Great answer. I accept that.
Thank you.
All right. Favorite wine restaurant and or bar? New York City.
Yeah.
And then give me one anywhere from your travels.
Oh, no.
And I'm asking you about a restaurant because this is a wine show that
Yeah.
has a lean towards
Of course. I like, I mentioned the Contra Boys earlier. I like Wild Air a lot.
Contra
right
and
now.
Wild Air.
I think Wild Air is just, it's the way I like to eat right now. It's thoughtful without being fussy. Jorge's always got a magnum of something crazy
wine list is-
hidden behind his back, and he's just, it just appears. The wines are fascinating. That's a restaurant that makes me really happy right
I
now.
think that's a great answer and sort of epitomizes the question. And,
And-
they actually do wine and food pairing there. Jorge
sure
thinks about it.
But they don't. They don't make you think. They don't. Yeah, they do it. They don't make you think.
No.
They're
I'm
actually-
joking a little. They do it sort of seamlessly.
Yeah, you don't have to stop and
Yeah.
chew and swallow and look
What
at the-
about anything in your travels that was an oh wow?
I another place that sort of if you it's not. They have a little bit of food. There's a place in Copenhagen called Vedstraden 10 or something, I think. It's a natural wine bar. It's VEDSTRADEN, I think, 2 words. Vedstraden 10. I think 10 is the address.
That stood out to you?
Yeah, it's just a fun place. That it's they've got they love wine, and they love sort of. It has the same sort of. I don't know, that kind of excitement that Wild Air has.
Right.
Manfred's in Copenhagen. I don't know why I'm stuck on Copenhagen, but just in my mind.
It's become a food center.
I would say, one of the happiest sort of meals with a lot of wine that I've had in the last couple of years is Clown Bar in Paris.
Yes, very cool place.
Yeah, I love that spot.
Everyone in New York in wine that goes abroad to the wine
ends up
there.
Yeah.
You know, you see Instagram,
Yeah.
Patrick Cappiello, John, you know, they're all Laura Maniac. They all wind up there. All right, maybe you can answer this. Favorite all-time wine? Is there a wine that you had through your years that was like, oh my God?
See,
you may not be that kind of guy.
I'm not exactly that guy. I keep hitting this idea of story. So I like. When I first started getting into food, someone poured me some Domaine Tempier from Bandol. And
great stuff.
Then you read about it, and there's this connection to a kind of early culinary food movement in California between Alice Waters and Richard Onley in France, and all this sort of Kermit Lynch. And then when I did the rosé story, I went to Bandol because of that, and I got to spend a little time there, and so it's
it's memorable
best wine I've ever had. No, but it's a favorite sort of.
It's memorable.
It makes me happy to drink, and I would always drink champagne. Vintage champagne
is
makes
the most
me
underrated.
Even as highly rated as it is, the problem is it's rated for the wrong thing. It's rated as
a celebratory.
Right. I don't like flutes.
Right.
I don't want a flute. I want a wine glass full of sort of vintage champagne that smells like sherry and is poured out of a bottle that's bigger than my daughter.
So when you, I guess I'll use the word balked on the favorite wine and food pairing.
I rejected the question.
Rejected. A lot of people in the past have said some interesting things with champagne. Champagne and popcorn, champagne and fried chicken. Champagne is a sleeper with pizza.
Yeah,
it basically goes, with any food.
What they're saying is they like champagne and they like fried chicken.
Right, and it happens to go well.
Yeah.
So we're okay with that. All right, last question on the wine list is tell me other writers you admire, food,
wine, anything?
Yeah.
Oh, God. For living, dead? I'm clearly buying time.
Anywhere. Well, let's start
my favorite, my writing heroes who are not alive are like A.J. Liebling, who, could write about Louisiana politics or boxing or horse racing or New York theater, but always talk about where he had lunch. And his food writing about Paris specifically and New York always came out of this sort of the joy of it and the indulgence of it and the pleasure of it, and then the stories around it.
Anyone else? What about general writers?
General writers? I mean,
do you read a lot, or are you too
I can
busy?
I can read.
No, I know you can read. Do you read a lot, or you're just busy to sit down and pour?
I think like a lot of us, I'm reading something constantly, but unfortunately, it's my phone a lot of the time.
Right, it's not a book. I'm similar.
I try to read the New York Review of books because I look smart if I carry it around, even if I
instead of reading the book, you talk about the book through the information from the review.
You can read a review of
I've tried to pull that off.
Book of, but it gives. That's the great sort of scam of that publication is that they take every interesting fact and put it right in the story.
It's the Cliff's Notes of
current
book reviews and all. It'll get you through a dinner for conversation.
It's wonderful. Yeah, would I ever read an entire history about American lighthouses? No, but that review of that was fascinating.
Right, that's all you need.
Or how trees communicate through their
That's a great
roots.
example, because the topic is interesting, but that's all you need to know.
Yeah, 400 pages of that. I don't have the time.
All right, we're going to move on, and we're going to move to our weekly wine sip. Every week we taste a different wine on air. For our weekly wine sip this week, Adam brought in a Saveur Selects Wine Club selection. It's a 2014 Petite Syrah from California. Just a little background. Petite Syrah is also known as Durif in Europe and around the world, and it's a tannic, spicy, plummy, deep purple type wine. So Adam brought in the 2014. We poured it out. And, Adam, let's drink it on the air and talk about it. So,
is there swirling music?
No.
Okay. You might want to get like a drum, something like a drum roll.
So
That's fitting.
Color-wise, it's a deep purple wine, which is typical of a Petite Syrah. Petite Syrah shouldn't be confused with Syrah.
Right.
This is spelled Sirah.
That's confusing.
Preceded by Petite. Syrah is very big in Australia and the Rhone region. All right, so it's a deep purple. The nose.
I'm smelling into the microphone.
The nose, you get that plummy, deep red fruits, some currants and all of that. And then let's give it a sniff one more time. Pick up anything else, Adam?
No, it's yeah. So I already admitted I'm terrible with the wine.
All right,
wine
so
talk,
let's throw it over the tongue and let's see what we taste.
Is that the technical term?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing is the mouthfeel. It's a fairly unctuous wine. It's not a thin wine. It's got a medium to full body, which is nice.
But it doesn't hit you in the face either. It's
it's mouth coating.
It's not overstaying its welcome.
Right. And I'll back you against the wall again. Are you picking anything up on the palate, flavor-wise?
Some berries,
definitely dark berries.
Dark berries. I'm flipping through my notes to see if there's any cliff notes here. No, it's kind of warming and berryish. It's not too jammy. It's nice.
It is not too jammy, which is
tiny
nice.
bit of pepperiness, maybe. I don't know.
Definitely pepper.
Yeah.
Great call, and it is definitely plummy and berry-like and all that. All right, so I know you hate this question, but I got to ask you this. If you were going to pair this wine with something, do you see it with stuff like red meat or heavier foods?
I think this could be great with red meat. I, like a lot of people, don't mind wine with red wine with fish.
Not at all, right.
We're adjacent to Roberta, so pizza is on my mind.
Be a good
I think
pizza
this would be great
wine.
with some sort of sausagey thing with a little bit of red pepper.
Red sauce?
Some red pepper flakes in there. I think this would be a pretty versatile wine. And the idea of this wine club is to...
Well, I wanted to talk to you about that. So let's talk about the wine club. It's set up through Saveur. You could buy 4 bottles or 2 bottles. So take it from there.
Yeah, the idea is instead of going out and buying specific wines from winemakers and putting it out there under their label, this is meant to be a little bit where each bottle is kind of showing off a region or a grape, or introducing people to Petite Syrah, for instance.
Right.
And I think you get 4 bottles per shipment. It's $75 each, and then we're going to introduce a 2-bottle club for $38.99.
And how does that work? It's not monthly, is it? Or
it is 6 shipments a year.
So you commit to six shipments, the 4 bottles, or it'll go to 2.
Right.
And
the idea is each one is supposed to have a little story with it. So we send out some material with recipes, so there is some pairing
food
there.
pairing.
So this pairing isn't bullshit.
Right.
But it's our content. It's Saveur content, and it's like the name implies, it's Saveur selected. But the idea is not that we're going out and picking wines that you can, we're competing with your wine store. It's to sort of introduce you to an expression of wine or a grape or a region that maybe you're unfamiliar with.
Well, I could tell you a couple of interesting things. The 4 wines that are available in the club right now are Gewürztraminer, which is a great white wine from Germany and Austria. It actually goes well with Chinese food and other stuff. You don't see it around a lot, so it's interesting that it's one of the selections. The Petite Syrah, which is not your typical California red wine. You are doing a Viognier, which is a Rhone white varietal, which is a very fragrant, delicious wine. And, people are used to Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc. So the idea of introducing that. And then your only European selection is a Coteau Bourguignon, which is a French red wine and all of that. So I think those are the 4 wines available. So if you're interested, you go to Saveur Selects.
You can go to saveur.com/selects.
Okay.
Or if you just look up Saveur Selects. We've got an Instagram account too. But yeah, check it out.
All right, so let's talk business a little. So for the wines, Saveur /selects, you'll get to the wine.
Right.
If people want to go online and get more info or stories from the magazine, Saveur.com?
Saveur.com, yeah.
Okay.
And there's obviously wine coverage there. And
yeah, there's a treasure trove of it. I went through it. There's a ton of wine coverage. I mean, there's stories currently and that go back, and, some of them are timeless. And what else? We covered everything.
We're done with the speed round. I can.
We're done with the speed
easy.
round. You can relax.
What do you think of it? Is the wine opening up a little bit?
Well, I always ask my guests, do we like this wine?
Yeah.
And that's a loaded question to you, because if you don't like it, somebody's going to beat the shit out of you somewhere. But leave it to me. I mean, I think for the price, you're looking at 4 bottles of wine. You're looking at 20 and under.
Yeah.
One of the questions I ask my guests, mostly sommeliers, wine people, is give me a white and a red for under $15. And
right.
This is close to that price range,
Absolutely.
and I think it sort of
delivery.
hits that. And Adam was involved in the selection, not of the grapes or whatever, but the mindset of what we're doing.
We taste a fair number of wines, and we're picking this over this, and trying to pick what is the I keep saying story, but what's the story that's going to be useful for 4 bottles?
Right. It's a great idea. So
Thanks.
Saveur.com/selects. All right, we're wrapping up the show. If you have a question, a wine happening, or an event, hit me up at Sam at the Grape Nation. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Follow us on Facebook at The Grape Nation. Follow us on Twitter at Ben Ruby, and on Instagram at SBenRuby. We had to put that S in there. I want to thank Adam Sachs, Editor-in-Chief of Saveur Magazine, for coming in and talking about food, wine, subjecting me to this Pinot Noir, me subjecting him to the wine list. I want to thank our engineer, Vitor, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.